Let's be real for a sec. Ending a relationship gracefully, it can feel like you're walking on eggshells, right?
Oh, absolutely.
You want to be kind, you don't want to hurt anyone, but sometimes it's just gotta end.
Yeah.
We're diving deep today into a podcast episode that really got me thinking.
Oh, which one?
It's called Ending Gracefully: How to Leave a Relationship with Compassion.
Interesting title.
It really is. And it made me realize how tricky it can be to even know when it's time to say goodbye.
Right. It's like, is this just a rough patch, or is it a sign that something's really off?
Exactly. They
Right.
talked about this feeling of constantly being unheard. Like, that can be a huge red flag.
Makes you think, doesn't it?
Mhm.
Like, if your gut is telling you something's wrong, maybe you got to listen.
Totally. What do you think about that?
Oh, I completely agree. It's like they say, don't ignore those little whispers of doubt. They can turn into screams later on.
Ooh, I like that. And it's not just about vague feelings either.
Right.
They gave some really concrete examples of red flags like disrespect or dishonesty, things that can seriously damage a relationship.
Yeah, those are big ones.
I've seen it happen firsthand. Those red flags can be subtle at first, but over time, they create this toxic environment.
Absolutely.
And they made a really good point about dishonesty, like how it just erodes trust.
And without trust, there's no foundation.
Exactly. You can't build a strong relationship on a shaky foundation.
It's true. So let's say you've recognized those red flags and you've made the tough decision to leave.
Right.
How do you even begin to have that conversation?
That's the hard part, isn't it? They really emphasize the importance of preparation.
Preparation.
Yeah, like don't just spring it on someone out of nowhere. Not in the middle of an argument, definitely not over text.
Oh, for sure.
They recommend choosing a time and place where both people feel safe and comfortable.
Makes sense. I actually read somewhere that having those tough conversations while walking side by side can help. Yeah, it's less confrontational than sitting face to face.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah, it kind of takes the edge off a bit.
It makes sense, I guess. Like you're not directly in each other's space.
Exactly. And the podcast episode also talked about anticipating the other person's reaction.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Breakups are emotional. There's no way to know for sure how someone will react.
Right.
So being prepared for a range of responses can really help you stay grounded.
It's almost like mentally rehearsing for different scenarios.
Yeah, exactly. Not to manipulate the outcome or anything, but just to be ready.
Right, to be ready for anything.
From anger to sadness to maybe even relief.
It's true, you never know. So you've prepared yourself mentally and emotionally.
Right.
Now it's time for the actual conversation.
The big moment.
The hosts really stressed clear and honest communication, but also being compassionate.
It's a tough balance.
It is.
Yeah.
What really stood out to me was their advice on using I statements.
I statements.
Yeah, it's a really powerful communication technique, and not just for breakups.
Oh, interesting.
Like instead of saying, "You never listen to me," you could say, "I feel that we've grown apart."
Ooh, I see the difference.
Right. It's about owning your feelings and experiences without blaming the other person.
It takes the sting out of it a bit.
It does, and it helps the other person feel less defensive.
So it can make the conversation more productive, even though it's a breakup.
Exactly. It keeps the focus on the issue, not on pointing fingers.
It's about finding that common ground, even when you're parting ways.
And there was this other part that really stuck with me. They talked about acknowledging the positive aspects of the relationship
Oh, that's important.
and expressing gratitude.
Gratitude. During a breakup.
Yeah, it sounds counterintuitive, but it's about recognizing that even though the romantic relationship is ending, there were probably good times, valuable lessons learned.
It's like honoring the journey, even if the destination has changed.
Exactly. It's not about erasing the past, but appreciating it for what it was.
I like that perspective.
It reminds me of that saying, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened.
It's a good one. But even after that conversation, the story isn't over.
True. There's still the aftermath to navigate.
And that can be just as challenging as the breakup itself.
Absolutely. This is where the podcast episode really shines.
How so?
They go beyond that initial conversation and talk about the practicalities of what comes next.
Practicalities.
Like giving each other space to heal.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial. Trying to be friends right away can just complicate things.
I agree. You need time to process your emotions, adjust to being single.
Rediscover yourself.
Exactly. They also emphasized leaning on your support system during this time.
Having those friends and family who can listen without judgment.
It makes a world of difference. They also mentioned something else that's easy to forget when you're heartbroken.
What's that?
Self-care.
Ah, yes, taking care of yourself.
It's not selfish, it's essential for healing.
Totally. What were some of their specific self-care tips?
Well, beyond the obvious, like getting enough sleep, eating healthy, exercising,
Right.
they talked about seeking out joy.
Finding things that make you happy, even amidst the sadness.
Exactly. Like reconnecting with hobbies you've neglected, spending time in nature.
It's about filling your cup back up, right?
Mm,
Because heartbreak can be so draining.
absolutely. And they were realistic too. They acknowledged that sometimes, even with self-care, you might need extra support.
Like reaching out to a therapist or counselor.
Yes, there's no shame in asking for help when you need it.
It's a sign of strength, not weakness.
The hosts also talked about practical matters, like how to handle mutual friends or shared spaces.
Oh yeah, that can be tricky.
They suggested setting clear boundaries to minimize awkwardness.
Do you remember any specific examples?
One that comes to mind is dividing social events.
Dividing social events.
Like maybe take the Friday night hangouts, your ex takes the Sunday brunch crew.
Clever. What about social media? That could be a minefield after a breakup.
Oh, definitely. They actually recommended unfollowing each other, at least for a while.
To avoid those constant reminders.
Exactly. It's like a digital detox from the relationship, out of sight, out of mind.
It makes sense.
Right.
And I think they also talked about creating a clear schedule for practical things.
Like picking up belongings.
Yeah, or handling shared finances.
The more you can clarify those details up front.
The less room for miscommunication or resentment down the line.
Exactly. It's all about minimizing unnecessary hurt, making the transition as smooth as possible.
It sounds like they really covered a lot of ground.
They did. They even shared some real-life examples from their listeners.
Oh, I love those. Remember the one about focusing on positive memories during the breakup conversation?
Yeah, that one was great. It's like shifting the focus from the pain of the present to the good times you shared.
It can definitely soften the blow.
And they had another story from a listener who learned the hard way that ghosting is never the answer.
Oh, right. That one was powerful.
It really highlighted the importance of open and honest communication no matter how difficult it seems.
It's like ripping off a Band-Aid. Better to do it quickly than drag it out.
It's about respecting yourself and the other person enough to have that tough conversation.
Choosing the path of integrity, even when it's uncomfortable.
It all goes back to that theme of ending with grace, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's about having courage, honesty, and respect for both yourself and the other person.
And what I loved is that they gave tangible advice on how to actually do that.
It's one thing to say be compassionate, but it's another to give people the tools to actually do it.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like they gave us a toolkit for navigating heartbreak with grace.
So before we move on to the next part of our deep dive,
Yes.
I'm curious what resonated most with you from what we've discussed so far. It's always fascinating to hear different perspectives. What really struck me, is how they didn't sugarcoat it. Breakups are messy.
Yeah, for sure.
There's this pressure to just get over it quickly.
Just like snap your fingers and you're fine.
Right. But the podcast acknowledges that it's a whole emotional roller coaster.
It's like they're saying, hey, it's okay to feel all the feels.
Give yourself permission to grieve,
Yeah.
to process everything.
And it's not just about ending the romance, right?
No, it's all the other stuff too.
Like, what about the shared stuff? Pets, mutual friends.
All those layers.
It made me think about those things in a whole new way.
It's a good jumping off point for some self-reflection,
Like, they give you the principles.
Compassion, respect, all that.
And it's up to you to apply those to your specific situation.
Because every breakup is different.
You can't just follow a script,
What matters is approaching it with empathy,
even when you're hurting.
trying to understand the other person's perspective.
It's like that saying, be kind, for everyone is fighting a hard battle.
Exactly. You never know what someone else is going through.
And even though the romantic love is ending,
It doesn't have to be the end of all respect.
that's a good point.
You can still acknowledge the good times, the history.
Without staying romantically involved.
Those listener stories really brought that home.
They did. It felt so relatable.
Grounded in reality.
One thing that stood out to me, which we haven't touched on much, is the self-care part.
Oh, yeah, so important.
So easy to neglect yourself when your heart is breaking.
But it's crucial. Not selfish at all.
What were some of the specifics they mentioned? I can't quite recall.
Well, aside from the basics, like sleep, food,
Right.
exercise,
Right.
they talked about actively seeking out joy,
Oh, that's nice. Finding those little things that bring you happiness.
reconnecting with hobbies, spending time in nature,
It's about replenishing your energy, right?
because heartbreak can be exhausting.
And they were honest about the fact that sometimes self-care isn't enough.
You might need more support,
Like talking to a therapist.
which can be So helpful.
There's zero shame in that.
It shows you're taking your well-being seriously.
The podcast really made it clear that a breakup isn't just an event.
It's a process.
And then that process takes time.
With ups and downs along the way.
But they kept coming back to those core things. Communication, empathy, self-awareness.
Those are valuable in any situation, really.
Not just romantic relationships.
It's like life lessons disguised as breakup advice.
Exactly. Hadn't thought of it that way.
One of the most surprising things for me was the idea that breakups can be opportunities.
Opportunities? How so?
They presented it as a chance for growth, self-discovery.
When a relationship ends, it forces you to look inward.
To figure out what you truly want.
What worked, what didn't.
It's like a relationship autopsy for personal growth.
And using that knowledge to make better choices in the future.
Learning from your mistakes, but taking it a step further.
Building something better.
There's a saying, sometimes good things fall apart so better things can fall together.
Oh, I like that.
And it reminds us that endings, even though they're tough,
Often open up space for new beginnings.
beginnings that might be even more fulfilling.
This has given me so much to think about.
Me too. It's like a new lens for looking at these transitions.
Those core values they emphasized. Communication, empathy, self-awareness.
They're universal.
So, before we wrap up this section, I'm curious. What's the one thing that has really stayed with you from this conversation?
You know, for me, it's that word grace.
Yeah.
It just keeps coming back to me. It's such a powerful idea, especially when you're dealing with heartbreak.
Yeah, it really is. It's so easy to get caught up in all the negative emotions.
Anger, blame, hurt.
But to choose grace in those moments.
It's like taking the high road when you just want to scream and shout.
And it's not just about being nice to the other person.
Right.
Choosing grace is also a way to be kind to yourself.
Oh, I like that. How so?
Holding on to all that anger and resentment.
It's heavy.
It weighs you down, keeps you stuck in the past.
You're carrying all that baggage.
Exactly. But choosing grace, it's like you're setting yourself free.
It's like you're letting go of those heavy chains.
You're not denying the pain, but you're transforming it.
Into something that helps you heal.
This whole conversation has really changed how I think about breakups. Me too. It's not just about the ending itself. It's about how you handle it.
The how is everything.
It's the difference between feeling completely shattered
Versus coming out of it with some valuable lessons.
knowing that even though it hurt, you did your best.
You were honest, you were respectful,
To yourself and to the other person.
and sometimes that could even lead to a different kind of relationship down the road.
Maybe a friendship.
Or at least a sense of mutual understanding.
It leaves that possibility open.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into ending gracefully,
I want to leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
I'm intrigued.
Imagine you're facing a breakup, sometime in the future, or maybe thinking back to one in the past.
Okay,
How would you apply these insights to make it a compassionate and respectful experience?
that's a good one. It's easy to listen to advice, but the real test is putting it into action.
And remember, even if you've made mistakes in the past, we all have.
There's always room to grow and do better next time.
It's a journey.
We're always learning.
So keep these ideas in mind as you navigate those tricky waters of relationships.
Because ending with grace, as challenging as it may be,
It's always an option. And it might just lead you to a stronger, more peaceful version of yourself.